Hey friends, this is Ganesh and video number 23 on ABAP. In this session, I'm going to explain a concept called modularization technique. So, mostly you heard about this concept or you know about the functionality. What is modularization technique? A simple one statement is repeatedly used particular statements, particular programming lines can be saved or can be stored in a separate place, and whenever is required we can call it. Instead of repeatedly write the same statement again and again, keep it in a separate place. Whenever is required you can call it. You may be called from the same program or you may be called from the different program. So that is the idea of modularization technique. So keep the repeated statements in a place and just call whenever you require. In ABAP also we have the same concept, and in ABAP we have four types or coming under this modularization technique. There are macros, subroutines, function module, and include program. Okay, so we'll see one by one. And this session I'm going to explain about macros. So this is the idea of modularization technique. It's like nothing but the repeated statement. I'm going to keep it in, so these three lines are repeatedly used in the same program or a different program or different objects. So I'm going to keep it in a separate place and I'm going to give a name for it. And whenever is required, I'm going to call it from the same program. Maybe there's three things, maybe they call in the same program, or it may be a different program 1, program 2, or class 1, class 2, or a function model 1, whatever it is. So it depends on the requirement. We can keep the repeated statements in separate place. So one or a simple example is I want to get the plant information, all the plant details. I want the master data, I want to take it. So it may be used in several places in the program or several places in the project. You're going to design a project. In that case, you can keep that particular select query or the validation of that, you can keep it in a separate place and you can give a name for it. So validations, master data retrieval, like that you can give a name, and whenever is required, maybe that may be required in 2 different programs or maybe 5 different reports. So you can call the same the particular space in the 3 different or 5 different programs, and the same thing is going to be used over there. So that is the idea of modularization technique. Okay, or simply we can say reusability kind of. Yes. Then the next one is types of moderation technique is macros, subroutines, function module, and include program. So now we're going to see about macros. So macros is going to be designed in 2 keywords, or I can say block. One is define, and then macro name you have to give, some names you have to give, and the macro end with end of the definition is, sorry, end of the macro is end of definition. So these are the keywords you have to use it. So this is going to be a block which you are going to use it. And the next one is placeholders. Placeholders is nothing but parameters. So like I want to call some statements, but dynamically I want to pass a value. For example, depends on my input, I want to get the plans. I don't want all the plans for my requirement or for my report. Based on some value, for example, based on the company code, I want my plans. So I'm going to pass a company code, different company codes from different program. Depends on that value, it should get the data from the database table. There is one particular requirement. So you need a parameters for that. Dynamically, you need to pass. There is a medium to just carry the value from your main program to your macros or subroutine, whatever it is, wherever you have the code. This one, I'm talking about this, please. Okay, so you are passing a value while calling this particular subroutine or particular space. You're going to pass a value to it based on your input. It should work. Okay, so to there is a medium between these two is nothing but the parameters. In macros, the technical term is placeholders. So you can have 9 placeholders in your macros maximum. And ampersand is nothing but a position. It's going to be define the position of your placeholder. Okay. And exceptional cases, meaning use the macro for very rarely, or if it is required, please make use of it, because you might be aware of it. So macros is nothing but an abbreviation of the statements or abbreviation of the your lines of code. Meaning if you call the macros, it's going to be replace the code, whatever inside your macros is going to be replaced in your main program. Okay, so if there is a 10 lines of code is available in a macro, you're going to call the macro 10 times, so it will keep on increasing at the compilation time. It just increase the programming size, so it's not required. So whenever there is a macro, you have very limited lines. You're going to call only one or two times a macro, then go ahead with the macros. Other than that, you have a lot of other options like subroutines. Once I come to a subroutine, I'll give a difference between macros and subroutine. Then you come to know, okay, this is a reason we go with subroutine than macros. So very basic idea is very exceptional, and make sure the macros is calling only once or twice in a program. Please go with the macros, otherwise don't. And very less coding or very less number of statement inside the macros. Another one is call a macro. How to call a macro? Just a name. You don't have any keyword to call a macro. Normally subroutines and all, you have a keyword called perform, and you have a keyword called call function to call a function module. But macros, you don't have any keyword. Just give a macro name. That is enough to call a macro. And before calling a macro statement, the macro must define in the program. So this is the basic one, meaning your macro definition is always above your macro call. So that is the meaning of this. So first you need a macro definition, then only you can use a macro call. And you can call a macro within a macros, that is applicable, but a macro cannot call itself. Probably you might aware of these one of two statements in your college days, like we might differ, like read the difference between macros and functions. So these are the points over there. So macro cannot call itself. Macro debugging session. This is one interesting part, because so far we used to debug a lot of things, but not in macros. If you want to debug a macro, there is an option in your debugger session. So you have to enable it, then only you are able to execute a macro. Otherwise, you won't execute any macros in a debugging session. And what else? Oh, that's it. Okay, let me take you to the system. So this is my system, and I'm going to define the macro first. So define is a keyword. So okay, tab, you'll get a block, M1. Just give any name. There are some restrictions. You can't use the ABAP keyword as a macro name. You'll get a syntax error. Okay. Suppose I'm going to use a keyword add. Add is ABAP keyword. Okay. Just Control F2. It shows clearly add is an ABAP keyword and cannot redefine as a define macro option. So you can't use any ABAP keyword. So that is the only restrictions over here. Control F2. Okay, I'll show you some interesting fact. I'm going to use variables inside it. Okay, I'm not declared it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to compile it. If I compile it, the system shows no syntax error, even though I'm not declared any variable, because while compiling the macro is not yet called. Okay, so it won't consider your definition of the macros. Let me check it. Able to see? No syntax errors found in the report. Okay, so that is the beauty. But if I call the macro, you know how to call a macro, just a macro name, and now press Control F8. Once there is a macro call, then the compile is going to start about the definition of your macro. Then it will give an error. It's give one by one. A, once you declare, then give B and C. Okay, so excuse me. Either you can define inside a macro or outside of the macro, but advisable is don't declare anything inside of your macro. That is not the best practice. So A, B, C. Okay. So now check syntactically correct. So this is a way to define a macro and call a macro. So currently there are no values. So let me have a value inside the macros. A equal to 10, B equal to 20. Activate and execute it. So you know the output. So then the addition of two numbers, simple. And the next one is the placeholders. Okay, before placeholders, let me show you how to debug a macros. Let me have a breakpoint, maybe here or on the, what do you call, macro name, whatever it is. I'm going to keep it here. It's a breakpoint. Okay, let me execute first without enable the debugging option for macros. What happens? The expectation is normally if you just, for example, over here, one second. The system is little slow, so I pressed more than once the F5 key. F8. Okay, breakpoint. Let me have F5 once now. Okay. Now the cursor is in M1. My expectation is not only mine. Normally, if any function, if I press F5, it takes you to the line number 10, meaning inside of your modularization technique. It may be anything, but macros won't. It won't get you inside your what you call definition of the macros in the debugging session, in a normal debugging session. If I press F5, it's come a little slow. Yeah, it comes to line number 21, but it executed your coding also. If I say the value inside the macro coding also got executed. Okay, so 10, 20, and 30. So macro executed. So now how to get into the macro in the debugging mode? So keep the breakpoint as it is, execute it. Once the cursor reaches the breakpoint, there is an option called there is a tool first. Yeah, there is a tool over here, this service tool, not this one. Okay, service tool of your desktop 3. Just click it. There is an option. Let me read out once it comes. Yeah, ABAP bytecode debug macro. And remember, if I double click this option, don't expect the same coding is available. There are some macro coding. You're not able to fully understand, but you're able to guess. Okay, so what is the first one? For example, what is actually the 10th line is doing? It is moving a value. Okay, you can consider as a move, and B again is a move a value to a variable. What is this 13th one? It's going to compute. So these are the language or understandings of macro. So in that way you are able to understand, because macro is not going to be 100 lines of code, right? Only 2 or 3 lines. So in that way you are able to understand, okay, this statement is executed, this statement is executed, and this is the output of the particular statement. Clear? So now I'm going to double click this option. Okay, so now it shows breakpoint at next application statement. So that's why I'm saying you're not able to see the exact code what you written. Okay, so here you can guess. Line number 20 is a move, so it's a equal to the value. So let me have a variable here, a, b, c. Okay, so all values are currently initially 0. I'm going to press F5. It's going a little slow because of the remote system. So now it comes to move. So my assumption is that is nothing but a equal to the value. So now it's assigned a value is 10, and the next move is b equal to the value. Let's see the value of b. Yes, and compute is nothing but c is equal to a plus b. What is the value of compute after executing the line number 22? I pressed F5. It's 30. Okay, so this is the way you can debug your macro. Okay, so not the exact lines you're able to see it. Clear? Got it. Now press F7. Just come out of it, and this is the value of your macro. So this is a way to debug your macro inside. I mean, definition of your macro. Another one is a placeholder. Placeholder is nothing but I'm going to call a macro by passing a value at the runtime, means dynamically. So what I'm going to do is, while calling the macro, you can keep the placeholder. So this is nothing but placeholder is ampersand one means it represents the first. Oh, sorry, not here. I'm sorry. 100 and 200. So I'm passing the value 100 and 200 to my definition of the macro. Now I'm going to decide. Okay, the first position is going to be here. The first position value. Okay, and the placeholder. This is my second placeholder. Ampersand 2, and the 100 is going to represent the first position, and the second position is for ampersand 2. So this way you are able to make it. Okay, so now I'm going to do M1 and M2. Let me have one more time. 500 and okay, 600. Okay, same, 200 is fine. Activate So I'm calling my macro more than once in the program. Execute. Excuse me. Okay, there's a breakpoint. I'm going to execute full. So first time it's 100 and 200 and 300, and the second time 500, 200, and the value is 700. Okay. So this is a way you can call the macro with your placeholders. Okay, any a maximum is 9 placeholder you are able to use it. And one more placeholder is like this, like select star from dynamically I'm going to design. Okay, it may be a 3 placeholder 3 and into table ampersand 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define or declare an internal table it mara type table of mara. So I'm going to pass the value and name of my table mara, and ampersand 4 is it's going to be an internal table, right? So I'm going to say it mara. Let me have one more data it vbak type table of vbak. So the next time I'm going to call with vbak it vbak. Okay, that's it. Activate. Okay, then execute. I have a breakpoint. Let's see the values of it mara and it vbak after the macros are getting executed. So now as initially both the internal tables are 0. Let's go one by one. fi fi. So it mara value is 441, and okay, there's a right statement, that's fine. And next I'm going to call another m1, and value of vbak is 81. So the same macro, it's worked with two different parameters. Okay, but mostly don't use a select and all inside macros. So you have a lot of other options like subroutine function module, but you should know, you should aware of the macros as well. Those, that is the reason I just explained the macros with all the placeholders, all the options, how we can use it. Clear? So another interesting concept is the breakpoint. Normally we use break, right? Break and the username. So the break is a predefined macro. Okay, let me show you that. So if you double click the break, and one second, because I want to show you the message. So what is a break? Yeah, if you double click the break, it shows break is a predefined macro. Yeah, it shows here break is a predefined macro from table trmac. So that is a table called trmac where all the macros are defined. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how this macros is getting executed in the debugging mode. So what I'm going to do is, let me, same thing, I have a one more additional breakpoint here itself. So let it be execute breakpoint, then go here and enable it in the debugging mode. Okay, now you can see two more lines are added before your macros. Normally this is our macro, right? A equal to B, that is the macro starts. But here 21 to 24, there is another macro, it's nothing but predefined macro break. Okay, so what is actually doing here is, if you execute, it just check whether the user has a particular, the user is valid, simple. It's going to first validate whether the user is valid, because it's a break username. I just give break best. Yes, it's going to validate it. If the 21 is going to validate in the line number 21, if it is execute, if it is correct, the user is correct, then it will go to 22, 23, 24. Okay, this is the coding level of your standard macro called break. So it goes to 22, it goes to 23 and 24 and just keep on executing line by line. Now, if I say some other name, some other username instead of best, I'm just going to give best one. Activate and execute. Best one is not a valid user. So now what will happen is it will skip the other two lines. The if condition fails, it skip other two lines and jump to the next one. So next one is nothing but next macro in the program. Next line is M1. This is the next line. It jumped to that program. So let's see. Let's jump to that macro, not the program. I'm sorry. So Fi, line number 20, and 21 is the actual check is happening. So now if it is success, it goes to line number 22. I'm going to press F5. If it is not success, it skipped all the lines and goes to the next executable line. So it just jumped from 21 to 25 because this checks got failed inside the macro. So you're not able to see the actual coding, but with the help of this particular, it's close to your coding, you are able to understand what is happening in the macro. Again, I'm repeating, macro doesn't have more codings, maybe 1 or 2, maximum 5, that is the best part. So it's very easy to debugging, very easy to understand also in the debugging mode. Okay. So hope this video might be interesting and useful. So please play around with macros, and if you have any doubts, please let me know. We'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for your time. Bye bye.